Good morning, friends. Live to you from Chicago, Illinois, where, yes, I had I don't know if you call it misfortune or sheer luck, that in the conference overflow hotel, when I checked in, the desk said, "Hey, we have a nice room for you with on a high floor, presumably with a good view. Who am I to complain? Y'all want to see my view? I don't know if you can quite get it. This is a photo. Oh, yes, there it is. I am looking at the Trump Hotel, or rather, you are, which brings us to our breaking news of the day, which is lovely that we have this symbolic view here of the excess of this presidency, how Donald Trump is using his office to support not the 341,789,338 residents of the United States as of May 17th. I'll let you round that to 341 million people he's responsible for. That is not the number he cares about, my friends. You may say it's just one, but he cares about 220 people who attended the most grotesque grift orgy that we have seen in this presidency. And I would say in the United States of America, not just in our lifetime, but in this nation's entire history. But before I get to that, because that is going to be a key theme of the day, as is, wait for it, at 9 a.m., we will have Charles Gaba, a very good friend, a longtime friend of my family's, as it happens, who is an expert on healthcare. We're going to have him on at 9 a.m. to break down for us the big, beautiful, so called big, beautiful bill that is going to rip healthcare for more than 13.7 million Americans. This show today, my friends, is all about money, law, and power, but also centered on health. And our theme of the show is PRISM. P as in, and let me just pull this up for those who are not aware of how we do this. PRISM stands for physical health, relational health, intellectual health, spiritual health, and mental health. And you're not going to believe this, but we have now integrated, thanks to Tank's mom, Tank. Tank, our beautiful turtle, our show mascot, is here featured with the Prism thing. So, yes, Tank, he's a fabulous little dude, really cares about his health. Now, let's get back to the money, shall we? So, the breaking news, I think you may have heard just this morning, is Donald Trump is once again creating chaos around the tariffs. Believe it or not, he has just somehow announced a new tariff level on Europe. I mean, I don't even fully understand what's going on here or why, but let me share his Truth Social message for you because this just broke at 6:43 a.m. Here we go. The European Union, which was formed for the primary purpose of taking advantage of the United States on trade. Let me stop there. Let me just stop there. No, I mean, the EU, wasn't it like, didn't it start with the Treaty of Rome many years ago? And it was trying to create an integrated European continent where there would be free trade, free labor, free trade, labor, and free money transfer. So there weren't so many barriers between the nations. It was meant to integrate. Yeah, it wasn't about taking advantage of the US, Donald. Okay, so oops, here we go. And there's more. He said the powerful trade barriers, VAT taxes, ridiculous corporate penalties, blah, 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 blah. I can't keep reading this. And I'm going to say blah, 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 blah. Therefore, I am recommending a straight 50% tariff on the European Union starting on June 1, 2025. There is no tariff if the product is built or manufactured in the US. Thank you for your attention to this matter. This man is in fucking sane. And why is he announcing this right now? I think I know. He is trying to take attention from the way of the grift orgy from last night. And I think the best way we can look at this and describe this is I just want to share with you what Chris Hayes had to say. Let's watch this and then we'll talk on the other side. And I want to talk with you all in the chat about this because I'm trying to imagine what it would look like for any of us to take advantage of, to exploit our own positions of power, trust, or authority to line our own pockets like Donald Trump is. We wouldn't even think of it. So I want you to think of it. I'm going to give you an example, but let's first watch Chris Hayes because I want you to know what went down last night in case either you were not entirely laser focused on it or you are trying to avoid it. Let's look it right in the face. Let's go.
Remember, the day before becoming president, Trump, day before inauguration, launched this meme coin, right? It's the Trump coin. And then this whole dinner thing was announced first back in April. It was at www.gettrumpmemes.com. The president's meme coin sought investors who would pour untraceable cash into his crypto wallet. And the top 220 got an invite to tonight's dinner. Black tie optional. For the top 25 Trump meme coin holders, there was an exclusive reception with the president before dinner. All told, in order to get in tonight's gala, the winning guests forked out a total of nearly $400 million, according to NBC News. This was essentially an open advertised competition to see who would pay the biggest literal tribute to Donald Trump's crypto coin. And because of the way this meme coin works, which is issued by Trump and his purchase always sends money to the company that he's part of, this is really not functionally different than if those guests showed up with satchels of cash or briefcases with stacks of bills and then just dumped all that into a big bucket physically held by the president of the United States.
Well, the website for the contest says that the president is appearing at the dinner as a guest and not soliciting any funds for it. Another site says that 80% of the Trump coin project is owned by two companies affiliated or in business with Trump.
Again, as Trump said, I launched the coin, right? These are Trump businesses. Again, now, if these were campaign donations, the level of the donations and the people donating would make this just an absolute facial violation of every campaign finance law ever. But again, it's even worse than that. This is not going towards Donald Trump's political campaigns or, his super PAC. No. This is just money in the president's business empire. And when asked, the White House keeps saying that Donald Trump, the president of the United States, is not attending this dinner where he's attending this dinner where he will make millions of dollars, not as president, but in his personal capacity.
On the president's dinner tonight, will the White House commit to making a list of the attendees public so people can see who's paying for that kind of access to the president?
Well, as you know, Garrett, this question has been raised with the president. I have also addressed the dinner tonight. The president is attending it in his personal time. It is not a White House dinner. It's not taking place here at the White House.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's start with the last thing, because that's the most important. And we'll go back to imagine us grifting. They think they're such flippin' geniuses by saying, oh, don't worry, he's not using his official title. This is not an official act. Is this ringing a bell for you? By categorizing what Donald Trump is doing here is something in his private capacity. This means that anything he did involving this, if it does involve any illegal acts that are in violation of federal statutes, he is not covered by the immunity decision that the Supreme Court issued. Now, I don't know if anything he was doing specifically violated the law, what was going on there, but We shall see. So I just want to put a footnote on that. Now let's focus on what the fuck. $400 million for access. Can you imagine? And I just want to throw this out here. Can you imagine what that would look like for a professor? You know, I've been teaching for decades, first at a business school and then at law schools, right? I'm a tenured professor now at a university at Wayne State University in Detroit, who does not endorse or reject, has nothing to do with this podcast, but I'm just mentioning it. So can you imagine if I decided on my own time, to throw a party off campus and invite anyone who wanted to attend, future students, existing students, past students, family members, parents, and said it was an exclusive event at my favorite restaurant in Detroit. And in order to get in, it was $1,000 a head. And there was limited space, a minimum of $1,000. But the person who gave the most money to get into the dinner, and I would say, you know, not let's say it was let's say, you know, students don't have that kind of money, but there could be a family member or something. The person who pays the most money will get private lunches with me once a week for a year. Lunches where we can talk about anything, right? Access. And but no, but not on campus, just lunches, because I'm a person too outside of work. And let's say the person, and that it was limited, this was limited to 20 people who could get in here. Again, minimum $20,000, but the person who pays, but you don't get in, you got to be the most, you know, so for I guess that turns out the lowest price point to get into this was $5,000. That's $100,000 that I could make, right? Off of that. But that's only if everyone was 5,000. Let's say the top spender was $50,000 because they thought, not, you know, wink, wink, nod, nod, that if that particular parent paid me $50,000, that somehow their student would get an A. Now, there's no guarantee, there's no quid pro quo, but they think if they work with me daily, I mean, weekly, they would have a leg up, right? You all know that that's fucking corrupt as hell. It probably even would violate some university policy, but I'm smart. I'm a lawyer. I could figure my way around it, I'm sure. And so let's say I do that. There is no question that that would be the most corrupt thing you had ever heard of. And probably I would be investigated and maybe put on paid leave until they figured out a way to get rid of me, because it does seem like that would be a violation of something, some morals clause or something, right? A situation where I'm raising probably close to $200,000 between all the people for one dinner for access to me. Okay, you know I wouldn't do that. And yet, this president is raising, you know, it's not just right now, billions of dollars off the presidency. And we know fucking damn well what that access will get him. And you may say, wait a second, why isn't this unlawful? And I would point to you, forget about the part about them saying it was personal. I will point to you to a decision. There's two different decisions. There's Sun Diamond, which I think I've told you about, but the most important one is a McDonald decision where the governor of Virginia was acquitted on charges of bribery under 18 U.S.C. 201, because even though there was a quid pro quo, money to him and things of value in exchange for access, the Supreme Court decided the plain language of the bribery statute does not say that access alone constitutes the kind of official act that is prohibited. Now, I might criticize the Supreme Court, you might, but this was a unanimous decision. And to be clear, as with the decision in Sun Diamond, which dealt with gratuities, and this decision, that they were both unanimous. It's been absolutely in Congress's court to amend that bribery statute. They could have changed it, but they fucking didn't. And this brings me to my book, Big Dirty Money. And I don't usually plug this book, But I have gone back and looked at this. This is the paperback edition from 2021. And I've gone back and looked at my book, and it breaks my heart. Because when I wrote it, it was published in 2020, but 2021 has an updated preface and epilogue. And it looks quaint now. What I was describing at the time, that white collar crime and corporate crime are vehicles for the wealthy and powerful to gain more wealth and power, and how it will erode our democracy. And I focus specifically in the preface and epilogue on Donald Trump. The rest of the book is sort of pre him and explaining how he got this kind of petri dish in which he could grow. And it breaks my fucking heart because, of course, when I first published it, it was before before Biden was elected. But when I wrote the paperback, it was after Merrick Garland had been sworn in, and I basically said it's on him to fix this, and he didn't. And I know there are a lot of people who defend him, and I have criticized him from day one because he could have fixed this problem. And I will remind you, and it's not just Donald Trump, it's white collar crime and grift in general. And I will remind you, and yes, I'm bitter about it, not bitter personally, but for our country, that the Justice Department, led by the Deputy Attorney General of the Justice Department, who's separately confirmed, who's usually in charge of like the white collar and business enforcement of corporate white collar crime, let's say that, and sets the policy. She set up a meeting where she was bringing all these stakeholders together. And there was, I think there was a certain senator, I want to mention their name, who reached out to me and said they were putting my name forward to this committee. I'm sorry, to the group organizing this. And they asked me, could I come up with some other names? And I came up with several other names for them. Now, I never heard anything. Months later, a friend of mine told me that he'd been to the meetings and how great it was and who he ran into at the meetings. My friend is a plaintiff's lawyer. So it turns out the people that I recommended, both of the people I recommended to be participants in this group, were invited, but I wasn't, because my views, I guess, were too offensive to them. And I think, although some of the ideas in Big Dirty Money, they absolutely adopted, to some degree, they didn't want me present, I think, because I may be too confrontational and was expecting too much from Merrick Garland. And he didn't deliver. And as you know, I firmly believe, and everyone says, oh, no, it's a Supreme Court who delayed things. No, if Merrick Garland had appointed a special counsel on day one in March when he was appointed in 2021 to deal with the blueprint left in the Mueller report, let alone the attack on the U.S. Capitol, if he had done it immediately and not had that internal to the DOJ, there would have been much more faith that it was being independent, and he wouldn't have been blamed, and they would have worked faster. And I know you don't agree with me. Some folks, I love my friend Allison Gill from Mueller. She wrote, she doesn't agree with me. I know that Marcy Wheeler doesn't agree with me. I am telling you, I will die on that hill. But let's go back to the fucking numbers and the corruption. So guys, here's what I want to say. Here are the numbers. The population of the United States as of May 17th, right? Just, not even a week ago, the population of the United States was 341,789,338. Hi, I'm that eighth one. How about you? What are you? What number are you? So the deal is here, when we look at these numbers, that's the population. Now, of course, Donald Trump doesn't care about the population of the United States. He only cares about US citizens, right? So we've got, maybe the number is lower than that, and then we've got to add US citizens who are overseas. Fine. So let's say he doesn't care about everyone. Let's say, in fact, the only people he cares about are registered voters. Let's look at those numbers. We're going to narrow this down. Okay, oops. So let's go here. So how many registered voters were there? Okay, so let's look first about the total population of people who are 18 years and over, therefore would be eligible to register. And these are US citizens, 260 million people. You got to add 3 zeros to this. This is one of those charts. 260 million people roughly are 18 or older. Okay. Of this, 236 million are citizens. How many are registered to vote? So we've got this population of 236 million citizens of the United States who are eligible to vote. How many are registered? Only 173,854,000. So 73% of the population is registered to vote. So let's say Donald Trump only cares about the 173 million, but we would be wrong, right? Because he doesn't care about the full 173 million. Let's say he only should, in his mindset, he promised maybe only to care about the people who voted for him. So let's get to those numbers. 155 million people voted. So let's say he just cares about the voters, right? 155 million people voted, right? That's only about 64% of eligible voters. So maybe he only cares about that 155 million, right? So we've now narrowed it down from 341 million people who are residents to 155 million who have voted. Okay, we've got it down to how many people he might care about. So let's say he only cares about the people who voted for him. Well, what are those numbers? 77,302,580, right? And for Kamala Harris, that was 75 million. So let's say Donald Trump only cares about the 77 million people who voted for him. But you would be wrong if you thought he cared about those 77 million people, because it turns out the only people Donald Trump seems to care about are the top 220 buyers of his meme coin. Those were the people last night who spent, what was the top? $400 million was the top bidder, I guess, at the very tippy top, or maybe that was the total. You can correct me from what Chris Hayes said. I heard 440 million. He cares about 220 buyers. So again, he cares about $400 million and not 341 million people. That's what we get to. And then you may say, oh, come on, Jen, don't be naive. And I don't want to be. It's not 220 people who he cares about. It is one. There he is. Donald Trump cares about one person and not the rest of us. He's being supported, though, it's not just him, by the entire elected Republicans, as well as the super wealthy, not just those 220 people, many of whom are foreign nationals, but people in the US who are fine with our serfdom, fine with more than 13 million people having their health care taken away, and fine with the dismantling of the federal agencies that were set up to balance the power between consumers and small businesses and big businesses. America is supposed to be a mixed economy where we have private business, but we also have the public sector, and they're supposed to be in a dance with each other, not this kind of dance. They're supposed to be in tension with each other, where we try to get the best out of the private sector, but we have limits on where the ends of pure profit motive will go. That's why we have labor laws to protect labor and employment laws to protect employees, and health and safety laws, right? Because without things like the FDA, without laws to protect us when we're flying, without this, we would not have the right balance. And that balance is askew. And it strikes me, and we've been honest from the beginning, that this isn't just kleptocracy or authoritarianism. This is we're kind of like in the stage where Russia was. I heard someone else say this, and it reminds me of Joseph Stiglitz, the Pulitzer Prize winning economist book, that kind of goes through this, which is called Globalization and Its Discontent. So in Russia, right after privatization, when Russia went from the Soviet Union to this privatized state, it was not staged well. And what ended up happening is they created a huge oligarchic and kleptocratic, eventually, class by essentially giving away or selling off, and I'm using shorthand here, the things that were in the public space. And I fear that's where we are. And that gets us to, before we get to Charles Gaba, who will be here in 5 minutes, some other areas of related to dismantling the health apparatus. And sorry, before I see Charles is waiting here, but before I get to this, I'm sorry, I've got one more thing to talk about. I was getting all, my hair on fire about this crypto meeting. And you already heard Carolyn Leavitt, Gestapo Barbie say that it was perfectly fine. Well, it wasn't just her. I don't want to just point to her. Also, Dennis Hassard is on saying, I'm cool with it. Let's listen to the Republican enablers right now.
I want to just ask you about this dinner tonight. President Trump is going to host hundreds of people who purchase millions in his meme coin. Today, you heard the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, say that he's doing this in his personal time, at his private club. But tomorrow, the top 25 people who spent the most money on his meme coin are eligible for a private tour at the White House. Are you comfortable with this dinner and these tours, which are likely to go to a number of wealthy foreigners?
Everything that the president's done has been carefully scrutinized by White House counsel, and they've given him the guidance that that's okay, and that's enough for me.
So, but what do you say to Americans who are watching this and who are concerned that a president is sort of using the office to enrich himself at the business and having this dinner with foreigners who are giving all of this money, and the White House is not even releasing a list? Do you understand why Americans are concerned? What do you say to them?
Look, the American people voted for President Trump because they know that he puts America first. He's putting America workers first. It's why we're getting the $1,700 to overtime workers, the $1,700 for people earning tips. And then we haven't even started talking about all the people who aren't going to get taxed on their Social Security. And so everybody in America knows that President Trump puts Americans first.
Well,
that's why they voted for him.
There are still Americans who are watching that and concerned. They want to know who was there. They want more transparency from this White House. But Kevin Hassett, thank you very much for your.
Wow. That's the Republican Party right there, or at least the elected officials, I should say. Now, one more thing. We've got RFK Jr., and I'm sure Charles is going to talk to us about him, head of health and human services. As erratic as Donald Trump, remember how he was promising he was going to find the cure for autism or the cause of autism? He's backing off of that. Let's listen.
Let me ask you about something you said when you were on Capitol Hill this week. You were asked about the lead crisis in Milwaukee schools. You told Congress, quote, "We have a team on the ground in Milwaukee." The city said that's not true and that they are still not getting the help.
I'm sorry, I'm giving you the Milwaukee clip. Hold on one second. He also said he was going to figure out autism. Now he isn't. Let's just play that Milwaukee clip. I apologize.
Let me ask you about something you said when you were on Capitol Hill this week. You were asked about the lead crisis in Milwaukee schools. You told Congress, quote, "We have a team on the ground in Milwaukee." The city said that's not true and that they are still not getting the help that they want from the CDC. Do you know who is on the ground? Who
the
were you under the impression
CDC
was
is
on the
giving them
ground?
assistance with their labs, their analytics, and advice.
They just said one technician was on the ground.
I can't tell you how many are on the ground.
He can't tell you anything. You ask him anything. He doesn't know ALS research has been cut. None of these people know anything. And that's perfectly fine because their job isn't to run things, it's to run things into the ground, to cut budgets and the like. And I will give you one more thing on the grift. I'm sure you've already heard. We didn't have a show yesterday because I was traveling, as you know, and we had this horrendous, embarrassing meeting in the White House with the president of South Africa, where he was buttonholing him and aggressively claiming, despite the words of people from South Africa, including white South Africans, that there is no white genocide going on in the country. All violence and crime and murder is terrible. However, there's a difference between crime and genocide. And at one point, to maybe cut the tension, the president of South Africa made what was a joke, but what is actually a very sorry statement about where we are as a country and who our leader is. Let me play that for you.
Need an Air Force One until our sets Air Force One. It's being built, 2 of them being built. But Boeing's a little bit late, unfortunately. So why did they give us a plane to the United States Air Force? That's what that idiot talks about after viewing a thing where thousands of people are dead.
I'm sorry, I don't have a plane to give you.
I wish you did. I take
I'm sorry, I don't have a plane to give you. And Donald Trump said, I wish you did. And this is a kind of joke that you tell, but he literally means it. He's sitting there being berated and thinking, I'm a leader of a country who doesn't have the kind of wealth as Qatar does. And obviously, this is right before the big crypto corrupt business orgy last night. He gets that it's pay to play. And so do we. And that is where we are. And with that, I am going to tell you about Charles Gaba before I bring him up on stage. This is Charles Gaba. This is his cover photo on Blue Sky with his son and with a certain man. I don't know who that is now. It's a beloved Joe Biden. And let's tell you more about Charles Gaba. This is a website he had started, I think, back in 2013 called acasignups.net. I love this. I love this headline to one of the pieces he wrote, bringing the pie charts to a knife fight. I love my pie charts. So with that, I am going to ask Charles more about himself when he comes up on stage. I'm so excited that he could make it. Hey, Charles.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. What's going on today with you?
Wow. Well, yesterday was a lot, so I'm kind of in recovery mode from that. So, I noticed your headline was, expert fumes, and
is that okay? Are you fuming?
I'm a little too exhausted to fume, but I'm definitely not happy today for obvious reasons. So when we can
so talk about that. I mean, I guess we've talked a little bit on the show about what was on the table and this weird thing with sequestration. But can you tell me, bottom line, and this is a bill that kept changing because of the manager's amendment, what you think is in it, why that's bad, and then what's next?
Yeah, well, the list of what's in it and what's bad could take hours. There's a whole mess of horribleness in it across multiple departments, multiple areas. Obviously, I'm focused primarily on the healthcare aspect of it, and that's what's really gotten the most attention. Although there's all sorts of terrible things in other fields as well. Renewable energy and legal and just rule of law, all that. But in the healthcare field, so the biggest item that's received the most attention has been the Medicaid, the gutting of Medicaid, basically. That's gone through several different iterations, but at the end of the day, sort of the big ticket item that's gotten the most press has been the so-called work requirements, but it's actually work reporting requirements, because according to KFF, I believe something like 92% of people enrolled in Medicaid through the ACA expansion program, which is around 20 million people. Something like 92% of them.
Look.
Oh, hey, great.
Came with dude, I told you I love my pie charts. You see this?
Excellent. Yeah. Are either already working full-time, part-time, are enrolled in school, are caring for, are caretakers for someone else, and so forth. So this is a very...
Oops, I'm sorry.
Oh.
So I meant to keep you here. So guys, this is the chart. KFF put up this chart, and Charles is exactly right. He had his numbers. 92% of people are either full-time, part-time, they're caregivers, or they're in school or have a disability. We have this little orange slice where they're, and by the way, what we're specifically he's saying is this is people above the age of 18 and under 65. It's not everybody getting Medicaid. Right. So this idea that Charles is saying that we talked about, and I want to get rid of this graph. Can you break that down? Because what is the accusation and how they've demonized Medicaid, and what are they really doing? Because you say it's a work reporting requirement. Why is that bad? So what are they trying to demonize, and what is it bad? Why is reporting bad? Can I just go send an email to somebody?
Well, first of all, even if it was as simple as that, it's a little bit, the Medicaid is not supposed to be a work program. It's supposed to be a healthcare program,
Good.
So at its heart. But even setting that aside, if you're going to, impose some sort of a reporting requirement. This has been tried. It's been tried in several states already, and in every one of them, it's been a disaster. It was put in during the first Trump administration. There were several states that got waivers to put Medicaid, to put work reporting requirements into place, and in every case, it was a mess. Arkansas is the most famous example or infamous example, where within, I think, something like 6 months of putting in place, 18,000 people who, for the most part, were working, or in school, who were complying with the rules, the requirements, were kicked off of the program because they put such onerous, basically they throw up a lot of hoops that you have to go through, a lot of bureaucratic hoops and red tape and so forth, which I thought Republicans were opposed to that sort of thing. Amazing how that works. And and because the thing is, that's by design. Because the whole point, the only way that work reporting requirements save money for the federal government is by kicking people off the program. That's the whole point. Fewer people enrolled, therefore they spend less to cover those people. That's all there is to it.
So it's endless paperwork in order to get people to either mess up on the paperwork or not do it on time. Or, sometimes you could be off for a week. You'd be in between jobs. And then what happens? I heard it's hard to get back on once you've been pushed off.
Well, exactly, because basically you're reporting that you're starting, you're reporting that you're ending, it's punching in, punching out. And you have to remember that the Medicaid expansion is primarily designed for lower income adults, which means if you're that lower income, there's a significant percentage who may not have a reliable internet connection. They may not, and the reporting is done, it's supposed to be done through a website in most cases. Well, you may not have a computer, or you may not have, a good connection or any connection at all. Things happen, maybe your power was cut off, maybe, there's any number of things. And I know in Arkansas, I believe the website wouldn't even take reporting after 9 p.m. for some reason,
And let me add to this, because I think you know this better than others. I only realized recently how this funding varies by state. It's a match. The federal government gives some money down from the Washington, and the states match, and the poorer states contribute less, right? So what's going to happen to? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
you
no,
explain that.
Well, yes, that is true. So there's two different categories, or primary categories, of Medicaid, right? There's the traditional Medicaid, and that's what a lot of this is about, or at least in the bill.
Okay.
Traditional Medicaid, there's around 60 million people nationally enrolled in so-called traditional Medicaid, and that's for low-income children, pregnant women, seniors, and people with disabilities. That is legally defined disabilities, receiving Social Security disability payment, that sort of thing.
And by the way, that pie chart excluded those people too, because these
correct.
are able-bodied. Okay,
yeah, that's about
continue. Okay,
yeah, that's around.
So you're saying 60 million have this traditional Medicaid. Okay.
Right. Then there's another 20 million or so who are enrolled through the ACA's expansion population, and that's, as you said, people who are 19 to 64 without minor children, and who are not. Or they may have minor children, but they're not in the category of parents with children, and who are not pregnant. So basically, and the term they use is quote unquote able-bodied adults. Right. And by able-bodied, all that means is that they are not legally defined as receiving.
Right, they haven't filed the paperwork for SSDI. They could have a back that they can't move, but they haven't decided to go apply for benefits or whatever.
Or they haven't been approved or what have you.
Right? Oh, right.
And so for traditional Medicaid, the way that the federal-state breakdown works for the funding is it's something called FMAP, and it's a matching percentage. And as you said, that varies from state to state depending on the economics of the state. So it ranges between 50% to, I think it's around 75 or 80% at the high end, is covered by the federal government. And there's a formula they use, and the wealthier states pay a larger chunk, so they pay basically up to half. So it's like a 50-50 split. That's like New York, California, and other states. And then the poorer states, Mississippi, Alabama, what have you, pay. The federal government pays as much as 3/4 of it, like 75 or even 80%. And I don't know the exact formula how that's determined, but so it ranges. That's for the traditional Medicaid chunk for 3/4 of the enrollees. For the Medicaid expansion provision, the federal government covers 90% of that regardless. It's just across the board, 90%, doesn't matter what state.
Okay.
And what Republicans are trying to argue, the talking point that they're using with this bill, is that they feel that it's unfair that the expansion population, the federal government pays more, for the cost for the expansion population than it does for the traditional Medicaid population. Now, my response to that is, if that's the case, how about if we raise it to 90% for everybody else too? It's not, you can argue that either way.
Right.
So for a long time, for a while, that they were trying to argue, what they were included in the bill was that they were going to lower that 90% for the expansion population down to the 50 to 75% match rate for the rest of the population.
The states must have balked about that, right?
Well, yeah, because there's no possible way that most of them could afford that or even anything close to it.
Right.
And so what would happen is it would amount to most, if not all, of the states which have expanded Medicaid under the ACA would basically drop it. And in fact, I think there's 9 states where they would legally be required to. That they have a trigger law in place that says that if that 90% match rate ever drops below 90%, it automatically triggers, that they would have to drop the expansion program completely. And so in the other states, like, even if they aren't required to, they probably would, because it would cost them a fortune, so that they'd probably drop it. And so that way, basically, it's a way of kicking up to 20 million people off of Medicaid without officially saying we're killing it. They're just basically just throw it onto the states. Oh, the states couldn't pay for it. Oh, well, sucks to be them, and go blame your governor.
So this was what they were trying to do. So where did it land in this bill then on this?
Well,
particular...
they actually ended up pulling that because there was a huge backlash on that, on doing so that officially. What they're doing instead is they are doing, so you've got this work reporting requirement thing, which again is designed to make it nearly impossible for most people to comply with, because that's where the supposed savings would come from, would be from people who either aren't able to comply or try and then give up, or maybe they're able to once or twice and then they get kicked off and they can't get back on again. And it also strongly discourages anyone who isn't currently enrolled from signing up.
Right.
Any new enrollees are going to be like, screw that. I'm not going to, I can't go through all that. Which again is the point. That's why it's designed that way.
And of course, there's not a person who hasn't accidentally missed a bill. It doesn't go on your credit report. But look, you forgot this one thing. You put it or something gets in your spam folder. We know that this happens, and it's designed not to provide healthcare, but it's designed to let's catch them. Let's just and get them off, and then it'll be impossible to get them back on.
Right. So they're doing that, but in addition to that, and like I said, that's gotten a lot of attention. But in addition to that, they're also doing a lot of other little, like, smaller things which actually add up. A lot of bureaucratic things, like increasing the frequency with which the states are required to verify the income of everyone who's enrolled through Medicaid.
Oh my gosh! So they have to ask you individually and get you to verify. Is that right? Or how do they do it? Or tax returns or something.
Well, the process varies from state to state, but yeah, basically there's some states where it's like every I don't remember, every 6 months or every year, and then so they want to increase the frequency, so that's like every month, I believe. They're also stripping away coverage of a lot of things through Medicaid. In states that, for example, in states that there are some states where Medicaid is required to cover abortion, right? With the state paying the cost of that. That's not federal dollars because of the Hyde Amendment. That's federal dollars can't be used for that.
Right.
The state is covering that cost for Medicaid enrollees, and the bill, I believe, includes a provision that says that any state where that is the case, that their matching rate, drops, or they're doing like this, like, targeted matching rate drop for certain populations, and of course most of those populations they're targeting happen to be are going to be more likely to be in blue states. So,
and you and I can get into the weeds, but let's just step back and say, we know, and I love this, we know each other. We could do this. We could just get some bagels, some coffee, whatever. But let's back up and go, someone did the math, right? I know it seems crazy because the Trump administration comes up with, batshit crazy math, but the Congressional Budget Office, someone had to look at this bill and do some math and predict, okay, if this is imposed like you're describing, then these dollars are, this range of dollars could be saved. Someone has done the math because them saying, no, we're not kicking anyone off or we're not doing this. Okay, so where else are they trying to squeeze us for cost savings in terms of healthcare in this bill? Or what is the knock-on effects of the overall deficit ad here that affects healthcare?
Yeah, well, I haven't even gotten into the ACA exchange part.
Okay, or SNAP. Okay, do whatever you think is, you run with this, Charles, because I want you to say what we should be worried about, because I don't know.
Yeah, well, like I said, the Medicaid side has gotten a lot of attention, but the other, and when I say the other, there's many others, but one of the other biggest areas that, as you know, my site is called ACA Sign Up, so obviously I'm focused primarily on that. Is that the Affordable Care Act side, there's 24 million people enrolled in ACA exchange plans. That's the private plans that you go to healthcare.gov or your state exchange, depending on the state you're in, and sign up for that. There's around 24 million people there. And the enhanced subsidies that were included with the Inflation Reduction Act that made those plans far more available for millions more people, including my own family. Those are currently set to expire at the end of this year. And there's been a big push to extend that out, or hopefully make it permanent. But Republicans clearly have no intention of doing that. So they don't have to do anything. They're basically just allowing those to expire. That alone is going to cause insurance premiums to skyrocket for tens of millions of people. But in addition, the bill itself includes a whole bunch of ACA exchange-related stuff, which, for example, and some of that interacts with Medicaid. So, for example, if you're on Medicaid right now in an expansion state like Michigan, let's say, and you're enrolled in ACA through Medicaid through ACA expansion, and you do get kicked off because you don't comply with the red tape, then you would think, oh, well, at least I'll be eligible for subsidies on an exchange plan. It might cost me a few bucks, but at least it's still better than being kicked off entirely.
Okay, right.
Nope.
Wait. So this is, okay, so hold the phone on this, because this is so huge, because I would think, okay, what's the big deal? We, go find, not big deal. It's a pain in the ass to find a plan, but a lot of independent contractors do have them. So back up, you're saying that if I messed up and didn't fill something out, or they messed up and now I'm off Medicaid, but I'm like, holy shit, I need health insurance. And I go, let's go to that Obamacare plan. Tell me why the hell I can't do that. I don't understand that, Charles.
Okay.
Under this bill.
Sure. So the way the ACA works is, so Medicaid expansion covers from 0 to 138% of poverty. That's your income, okay? That's around $16,000 a year for a single person, right?
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, poverty is 16,000. So this is around 22,000. I'm sorry. So
okay.
But ACA subsidies.
I'm sorry. So 130% of poverty is 22. So if you make 22,000 a year, you could be working full time. Hello, you guys know what minimum wage is, and so that's why you could have Medicaid. Okay, continue.
Yeah, and you would basically have to be working in order to have, it may not be a great income.
Medicaid expansion. I mean, yeah. Right. Okay, got you.
So you get kicked off. Well, the ACA exchange subsidies, those start at 100%, okay, and up. So there's that overlapping population.
A gap.
There's that overlapping population where if you're under 100%, you would not qualify because you were kicked off and you're below that minimum threshold for ACA subsidies. But even if you're in that 100 to 138 overlap income, where you have to be working in order to receive, between a $15,000 and $22,000 a year income, right? You have to have some sort of income that way. You get over to you get kicked off of the one, and you say, well, now I can get the subsidized exchange plan. Apparently, no, you wouldn't, because legally you are still eligible for Medicaid, and under the ACA, you are not eligible for ACA subsidies if you are eligible
Okay.
for Medicaid.
So I'm gonna do the math on this. So if I get kicked off, okay, and if I'm someone who makes between $0 and whatever that number is, the poverty level, you're saying I can't get Obamacare for that.
Right. Well, and
And
that's the case now in the 10 states, or I'm
okay,
sorry, in the 9 states besides Wisconsin, which have not expanded Medicaid. There is several million people caught in what's called the Medicaid gap, where they're screwed either way. They're not eligible for either Medicaid or
okay,
subsidy.
but with this bill, it makes it worse because now, in addition to that, you're saying if I'm someone who's making my $22,000 a year, um, or if I'm sorry, I can't even get ACA.
Well, you can enroll, but you wouldn't receive any subsidies. You'd have to pay full price, which would be impossible to afford at that income level. There's no way.
Oh my gosh.
There's no way that someone earning $20,000 a year could possibly afford a major medical plan at full price. It would be like half your gross income is what it amounts to.
Oh my God. So what about the states that require you to have coverage though?
Well, there is. That's
Because
actually a good
I
point.
used to live in Massachusetts and you're actually required to have coverage under state law. Maybe there's an exception if you can't afford it.
Yeah, the federal ACA penalty was eliminated several years ago, but there are still, as you mentioned, there are still several states that do have their own state version of that: California, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, DC, and I forget the other one, but New Jersey. But yeah, they do have like a hardship exemption, or they do have an exemption list. That's actually a very interesting point I hadn't thought about. I'd have to
You
look
had
into
thought
that.
about a point that I made. Yes.
So I'm gonna actually write a blog post about that. My guess is that you probably would not have to pay that penalty in those states under these circumstances. But again, I could be
It's
wrong.
more paperwork.
Yeah.
It's like so. I'm going to ask you about the what next, and I realize this is a nightmare beyond healthcare, and you haven't even gotten to even more of why this is even the knock-on effects of having triggering some of this cuts in other areas, including Medicare. People cannot believe when you say Medicare, they think, Jen, you said it wrong. But I did not say it wrong. There could be Medicare impacts. Okay, so I want to well, actually talk about that first before we move on.
Yeah, so that was, well, what's funny is I did a podcast earlier this week with someone else, and when they were promoting it, they accidentally, they said Charles Gale will be to talk about the cuts to Medicare, and I had to correct it. I said, oh no, I said just typo, it's Medicaid, not Medicare, but I included a note that said, but don't worry, I'm sure they'll get to Medicare soon enough as well. Ha ha. Literally 24 hours later, news broke that Representative Brian Boyle, I think his name is, he broke the news. Yeah, and it turns out that the bill itself does not like actually officially cut Medicare, but what it is there's an existing law called PAYGO, which I'm sure you know a lot more about than I do.
Well, I don't know much. I talked about it the other day. Yeah.
It basically amounts to a trigger law. It's a sequestration. It basically says that if a bill comes out that increases the deficit by a certain amount or a certain level, I guess, that automatically triggers automatic cuts to other spending, to try to rein in that spending. And so because the bill is so horrifically financially, fiscally irresponsible, and because it increases the deficit and the debt by so much, it triggers this other like $500 billion in spending cuts. And most of that would have to come from Medicaid, I guess, from Medicare.
Yeah.
And there's a cap, like you can only cut it by 4%. Well, that only 4% is several $100 billion. And in fact, the funny thing is, I wrote a post about that. The letter from the CBO that specifically says this,
Right into Boyle. Yeah.
It mostly talks about the Medicare cuts, but then at the end it also says, well, even with that, they would still have to cut like another $180 billion, but there's only $120 billion left to cut from anywhere else. So they're like, well, we're not sure where that other 60 is going to come from, but they have to cut something. And
so
you didn't need to get into that.
I want to back up and say, if Donald Trump really cared about us being competitive in terms of manufacturing or anything else, wouldn't this be the time to cut the bullshit and do Medicaid for more or Medicaid for all? And I don't know what that would cost. Obviously, I don't mean turning the ship around isn't easy, right? I'm talking about a phased way of doing this stuff. And I know, let's forget for a moment the healthcare insurance companies wanting to kill me and not allowing it, but maybe bring them in on the action, like have them manage it. But I don't know. I just feel like why are we doing this? It doesn't make sense in terms of what the society needs. Haven't done the dollars on that. Do we need to do that, or do you think we could patch this together if we had a decent administration and not this bill?
Well, you're operating on the assumption that Donald Trump's goal is to improve anything. His goal.
Oh no, it's not.
Right. The goal is, as far as I can tell, he has two goals. One is to enrich himself and his his
there
family.
it is. Yep, enrich him. Yep.
And number two is to literally destroy the country. He said that there was, I forget who it was, a few days ago, he wrote a great essay on this. He specifically said during the campaign, he will be speaking to his supporters, your retribution. He didn't just mean against his political enemies specifically. He meant against the country, the country that rejected him 4 years earlier. That basically the goal is to destroy the United States of America, and he's well on his way. So you have to look at it from that framework. That yes, if his intention was to actually improve the U.S. healthcare system, it would not be to be doing anything that he's doing right now. So. Yeah.
So I want to share with you, I guess, two things. I got one video I want to share with you, and then I want to do this thing called Crazy Town. I bet you don't watch the show, so oh well, Charles. I'm going to play this video and have you comment. This is from the FDA commissioner.
And we make a decision about safe and effective. We have been suspending that role for the last 4 years with COVID boosters. And so we're saying this is a reasonable time to check in and look at clinical trial data, given how different it is. By the way, America doesn't want COVID boosters.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm out of time, actually.
Thoughts?
I'm sorry, what did he say at the end there?
America does not want COVID boosters.
I would.
Yeah, I mean, who is he talking to? So, yeah. What happened to choice? I thought, again, this party was the party, no red tape, the party of choice. Now it's like obstacles, red tape for you, no obstacles for us. I mean, what's going on here? I would love a COVID booster. Right when I get my flu shot, I want my COVID booster.
Yeah. I mean, that. I think there was a poll last week I saw that apparently it claimed that something like 40% of Republicans now think that the COVID vaccine itself has caused more deaths than COVID itself. I don't know if that's an accurate poll, but
that's a perception.
If that's true, or if it's anywhere close to that, then that's a horrifying problem, which I should note is much bigger than Donald Trump. I mean, he certainly has been responsible for a huge, for spurring this into overdrive. But that's just a massive public information and education problem that this country has. When you have that many, when it's anywhere close to that number of people who think something like that, the disinformation, misinformation and disinformation is a combination of both. It's horrifically out of control.
Yeah, one more clip before Crazy Town, and you had mentioned Rep. Boyle, who is a ranking member on, the Democrat on the Budget Committee. Let me play this and see what your thoughts are. I think this is right after they passed this horrendous bill.
Just verified with the Congressional Budget Office, and of the 13.7 million Americans who will lose their health care because of their bill, exactly 0 are undocumented immigrants. So the complete artifice that the other side is attempting to convince you is that almost 14 million Americans will lose their health care, but don't worry about it. They're all illegals. They're all people who are defrauding the system. It's completely false, and every independent source has verified that it is.
I didn't even know they were saying that. Have you been hearing that as well?
Oh, that they're claiming that the people losing coverage are undocumented. I mean, I I don't know if I've heard that specifically, but the gist of the entire administration of everything that they're doing seems to be it's to get rid of undocumented immigrant.
Right.
That's like that. They justify just about everything they're doing. That this is a way of getting rid. It's either getting rid of
suspend
DEI.
habeas corpus, violate Supreme Court orders.
Exactly.
Yeah, separate moms from their babies after childbirth if they could. Yes, all that is
just either about DEI or immigrants. That's what it's all about. And by the way, I should note the 13.7 million figure that he said that was the CBO's projection based on I believe that was based on a previous version from a few days earlier.
Oh, right before the manager's amendment came in.
Yeah, because they added a whole bunch of extra stuff. Like for example, they moved up the work reporting requirements by 2 years, and they also added a bunch of other nasty stuff in there as well.
What's your number? Do you think?
Well, okay, the maps. And like for example, one that I didn't even know about until last night was that they slipped in a thing that apparently people who are on Medicare and Medicaid, they're so-called dual enrollees. There's around 12 million dual enrollees. They're enrolled in both. Like, let's say you're a senior citizen who's also very low income, so you can't afford nursing home or long-term care. Then you would be enrolled in both Medicare and Medicaid.
Oh, and that can happen if someone gets really sick and they spend down. And
Yes.
It's very it's not that uncommon, right?
Yeah. So apparently, a percentage, there's a certain portion of that population, around 10%, I think, around 1.2 million, who would lose Medicaid coverage. So even though they say that it's not going after Medicare, well, okay, you're still on Medicare, but you've just lost the ability to pay for your long-term care.
This is disastrous because Medicare taps out after a certain number of days in a hospital. What if you don't have family to take care of you?
Exactly.
Put them out on an ice float? I mean, what are we doing here?
So
okay,
my big project is, I'm sure for the last couple months, has been to breaking out. I've got pie charts galore, as you said. Where basically I'm breaking out total enrollment in the various programs in ACA exchange plans, Medicaid, traditional Medicaid, Medicaid expansion, the Children's Health Insurance Program or CHIP, Medicare traditional, Medicare Advantage, all these different types of programs for every congressional district in the country. Obviously, there's 435, so it's a big project. But to show here's how big the slice is in your district, this slice, that slice, and when you add up. As I said, there's around 24 million enrolled in AC exchange plans, around 20 million through Medicaid through expansion. Plus, there's around 1.8 million in there's a program called the Basic Health Plan Program or Essential Plan or Minnesota Care. It's specifically in Minnesota, New York, and Oregon. So all told, you're talking around roughly 40 up to 46 million people. Now, that's the total number of people enrolled in all of those.
Okay.
My guess is the actual number, if this bill, as passed by the House the other day, was to be passed and signed into law and implemented, my guess is it would be somewhere between that 13.7 million that the CBO said a few days earlier and that 46 million. So somewhere between 14 to 46.
So you're like 28 million or whatever. Okay.
Well, I mean,
who knows?
Well, just to give you a quick example. So my own. And the other thing to remember is, so that's the CBO. That's basically around 30% of the combined total of all those programs, right?
Right.
So somewhere between 30 to 100%. Now, the other 70% who are not, who do not lose. Let's say that it is the CBO's low end. Let's call it 14 million. Everybody else on all those programs is still going to go through some pain, either in the form of massive paperwork and red tape and jumping through hoops, or through massive rate hikes, like in the case of my own family. If my own family, so we're on an ACA exchange plan, we're both self-employed. If we were to stay on the exact same plan at the exact same premium, and it's going to be higher because premiums go up, but if we were to stay on the exact same plan at the exact same premium that we're paying today next year, and those enhanced subsidies are not extended,
right,
our premiums would jump by $6,000 next year.
Ouch.
Now, obviously, we can't afford that. So what are we going to have to do? Well, one, we could downgrade to a worse plan, right? Go from I'm not going to say what our income is. I'm not going to say what our plan is now, but if we're on a gold, we downgrade to silver. If we're on a silver, we downgrade to bronze.
Right.
so basically you're downgrading to a worse plan with a higher deductibles and, so forth. Or if you're on a PPO, you might go to an HMO. So now, you got the hassles of that, et cetera.
Right.
Or option 2 is you go with a so-called junk plan, basically one of the pre-ACA plans where there are no or very few patient protections. Or one of you has to get a full-time job, which is what we're discussing as well. So basically there's everybody else is going to have to go through either that, or if you're on the Medicaid side, fine, you may not get kicked off, but you're going to have to go through a continuous red tape hassle to stay on.
Wow. And you haven't even mentioned people, in the chat who are very worried. Even if you're not, you don't know, is it you next? Month to month, the level of stress. Okay, yes. So Charles, now we get to Crazy Town.
Okay.
So I play some music. You don't have to do jazz hands. You can. And then I'm going to play you a crazy clip, and we comment, and then we say goodbye. Okay, are you ready?
Okay.
Yay! A little dancing. Okay, today Crazy Town is Donald Trump. And this was a really weird glitch. I have no idea what he was trying to say. More than normal, he wasn't making any sense. Let's play it.
They will fight the drug companies. The drug companies are very worried that they're going to fight, and that's okay. If they fight, we'll just say, that's okay. We are not going to let you sell any more cars into the United States, or we're not going to let you sell any more wine or liquor or alcohol or something that's actually much more important to them than the drugs. And we're going to be able to force that issue if we need to. They should do it. We're basically equalizing. They should do it. And, the drug companies should do just as well. There shouldn't be a hit on their stock. I don't think it will be. It's basically, it's going to be the same amount of money, but it's going to be redistributed. And it's going to be redistributed, so they're going to pay a little bit more, and we're going to pay a lot less. A little bit more because there's so many more. It's a bigger number.
Help me out.
Okay, I heard drug companies, cars,
selling cars,
and wine.
Okay, so
wine, drugs, so alcohol, drugs, and driving.
But he was suggesting pharma companies are now selling cars and alcohol. And did I miss something or no?
All I heard was something about driving while on drugs and drinking. So, which are three things which I don't think really belong together.
Well, yeah, not great. Well, thank you for joining us on that note. I'm in Chicago. I don't know if you can tell at a conference. I'm not in, that is not Michigan. But hope to see you sometime in Detroit.
Absolutely.
Come visit me in Midtown. It's happening down there.
I will see what I can do. And thanks for having me on the
show.
show.
The burbs. Well, thanks for having me. And everyone, please follow Charles on Blue Sky. What's amazing is he goes state by state with this stuff. And so you can just zero in on your state. He knows more than anyone that I know about this topic, but he's also really intelligent, has interesting things to say about all manner of data. So if you have a data question, or I think you do consulting in other areas, and you have a website, don't you do website consulting too, or are you just doing this all the time?
Well, that's how I was a website developer who stumbled into healthcare data analysis through a weird story. My wife and I still run, we have a website design and development.
Oops. So what I want to say, sorry, I have a little technology issue. So find Charles Gaba. He does consulting. He knows everything about healthcare. I hope his wife or he doesn't have to take a full-time job in order to pay for healthcare. That would be really ironic, or maybe right in line with where we are. Anyway, have a great weekend, everyone. And with that, ciao.
Hello, prison mates. It's the Gen Taub Show, where welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There is hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Gen Taub Show.